Okay, hello y'all. Welcome to this field trip. We are here at Transcending Perfectionism and Embracing Your Craft, a Creative Mornings conversation with Jen Hewett. My name is Alexa Cutler and I am part of the Creative Mornings team. My background is in facilitating creative learning experiences for adults, community building and education, and I will be your guide today. It is so lovely to see so many people from so many places around the world. Thank you for joining us. A quick note on our agenda. Today, I'm going to do some brief introductions, bring y'all into what Own Your Content is all about. I will then have a chat with Jen. We will do a quick activity around perfection and kind of overcoming some of that for each of us and what it means. And then we'll have a Q&A. So before I dive into things, I would love to introduce my co-pilot, Catherine. Catherine, will you spotlight yourself? She will be behind the scenes moderating the chat today. She'll be helping you with any tech questions that you have and fielding general questions throughout the call. So I'm not going to be looking at the chat for the first 45 minutes of the call. So if you have any questions or comments, please direct them to Catherine and she will help you out. So as y'all know, this is a field trip. So we really want to honor and lift up that spirit, make sure y'all feel engaged. So I encourage you to share questions, write comments, and interact with each other's ideas throughout the call. I think that's what really brings in a lot of the richness of field trips. If questions come up for Jen specifically, as I'm chatting with her, do note again that the second part of this call will be Q&A. So Catherine will actually be collecting questions in the chat throughout the call. So if you'd like her to put your question on a list, you can just write question in all caps next to whatever question you have. And that way she can make sure to grab it and then feed it back to us when we're ready. Thumbs up, everyone cool? We're on board? Yes, I love my thumbs up, thank you. Again, yeah, if you wanna have your video on, we're really trying to kind of honor that we're all in this space together. So I encourage you to jazz hands, clap, all those things. I can see you at least, so it always brings my energy up. So for those who are unfamiliar and for those who are familiar, as you probably have gotten a sense by now, this field trip is part of the Own Your Content series. Since 2018, Creative Mornings and WordPress.com have joined forces to bring you Own Your Content, which is a series of interviews, toolkits, and now field trips that explore what it means to create, share, and own the work that we put into the world. As part of this exploration, we talk broadly with creators about everything from how to get past creative blocks in order to actually create content, to how we retain ownership and control of our work in an increasingly complicated digital landscape. I imagine many of you are shaking your heads yes, I would love tips on that. We have them. Catherine is sharing a few links to previous interviews and conversations in the chat, so you can look them up later if you'd like to dig deeper. This conversation today with Jen is part of a series of field trips in season 3, and we're so excited to have her joining us to follow up on her original Own Your Content interview from 2019. So before we bring Jen up, I would love to get a sense of who's in the room. And if y'all were on the field trip with me, I guess it was last week already with Paul, you'll be familiar with this practice. I'm just gonna offer up a little poll to get a quick sense. This is a quick poll. So if you wanna share your answers, in 30 seconds we'll have maybe. You can see it now. It should be up. And you can choose as many of these items as you'd like. I'm seeing the results coming in. We have 400 people on the call. That's a ton of people, and I love seeing the little numbers go back and forth. We're 15 seconds in. Let's take. Oh my gosh, the number's going up so fast. You guys are amazing. Everyone's filling it out. I can just see people clicking. Let's take maybe 10 more seconds. I am seeing a beautiful mix of small business owners, aspiring full-time artists, folks that work for large and small companies, educators. We're 320 out of 402. I'll give you 5 more seconds to get your name in there. I can't actually see your names, but your spirit of your work. And I'm gonna share the poll now so y'all can see who is in the room. It looks like our highest, our most popular position is that you are an aspiring full-time artist, and I love that, and that's so appropriate for this conversation, as are all of those other things listed there, because Jen is a woman of many things. So I'm gonna stop sharing the results you want to just soak it in one more time. You might have to actually physically close the poll yourself so that it goes away, because I think when I close it, it doesn't close it for you. So just so you know. Oh, look, well, who's in the room? We already did that. So our next question is, I'm going to invite you all to share in the chat. What are 3 words that describe how 2020 has felt to you in relation to your artistic practice and your identity as a creator? So as you share these words in the chat, I'm actually going to offer up 30 seconds of silence for you all to read through some of the other folks' answers so you can really get a sense of who's in the room with us. And I know that silence can sometimes be uncomfortable, but I invite you to think of it as an opportunity for the voices in the room to be illuminated through your reading. So I'm going to start now, and let's see who's in the room with us. Okay, thank you. I'm getting word that my audio is a little wonky. Catherine, I'm going to bring you on real fast just to do a quick test. Thank y'all for bearing with us. Is it okay now? Sound okay?
We got a little bit of background going on, but we can hear you okay. So
Great.
You're good to keep going.
This is what this is what happens when we work from home, y'all. You know, it's craziness. We're all in this. So thank you for bearing with me. There is a siren outside right now, so that might be it. It's really happening right now. Okay, let me continue on. So thank you for bringing us some of these words. I see a kind of whole spectrum of experiences that we've had, some very hard, uninspiring. I see absolute dumpster fire, and it has been, you know, a wreckage of a time. And I see for some also it has been really inspiring and hopeful and bringing, you know, a sense of clarity. And I think all of us, we're all sitting in this together. So thank you for making space for that for each other. So I'd love to introduce y'all to Jen, who I am a huge fan of and so excited to have with us on this field trip today. Catherine and I have just been like, yeah, super grateful. In her book, Print Patterns, so Jen reveals that she never uses ink straight out of the jar, preferring to mix her own custom colors. And I love thinking of this sentiment when I look at Jen's work, because it's one example of how Jen is able to take something that many might see as a given, so a color that's been made for her, and translate it with this great intention to match her own vision of what the world might look like. Jen's work illuminates the natural world through prints, scarves, postcards, and more, reminding us not only to revel in the extraordinary patterns that surround us, but to also recognize that each of us has the opportunity to see the world through our own unique lens. So through writing and printmaking and teaching, Jen and her work carry this palpable and deeply communicable sense of power, joy, and strength. And what I love most about her work, aside from her own colors, is the way that she so thoughtfully pairs a beautiful print with a powerful observation. Through her blog and website and social media accounts, Jen brings people in to simultaneously revel in the beauty and boldness and delicacy of her work, while also offering people the language to think about what content ownership is, art as identity, and art as commentary, and what all of this really means in a digital age. So Jen, it is such an honor to have you here. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you, Alexa. And I think you just wrote my artist statement for me, so you'll need to send that to me because I've been waiting.
It's beautiful. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I mean, again, your work, so palpable, so powerful. Yeah, should we just dive in? I would love to start some of these questions thinking not necessarily at the beginning of your journey as an artist, but at the point when you started to really move into artistry full time, especially because I saw we have a lot of folks on the call who are in that process. So you had a big career pivot from 2008 to 2010 when you left your corporate career and pursued screen printing full time. And many of us can relate to either choosing or being forced into a big career transition, particularly in 2020. So I'm wondering, how did you navigate that time? And what is some wisdom you can share with people who are experiencing their own career or creative transitions at this moment?
Well, in 2008, I didn't leave my full-time job. My full-time job left me. The week before Christmas, I was laid off when the company I was working for in San Francisco, which was an American subsidiary of an Australian company, failed to be acquired. The acquisition they'd planned on just didn't go through because the economy was tanking. And so I was doing HR and operations at that time for the company. So I had to lay everybody off, including myself, the week before Christmas. And we saw that coming. I saw it coming more than anyone else, but it was also in some ways a huge relief. The acquisition process was really stressful, and I was quite honestly ready to be unemployed for a little bit. Now, I didn't expect that it would go from 2008 to 2010, but that's what happened. And so during that time is really when I had a ton of free time to go to the studio and really become much better at my craft and able to make lots of mistakes. And it was really low stakes, right? It was the early days of social media in many ways. So I could put all kinds of really crappy work out there and nobody cared. And actually, like if you're just starting out now, nobody's following you, nobody's watching. It's okay to put tons and tons of crappy work out there. The point was really for me to do the work and do a lot of it. And that was also a time when craft fairs were becoming a thing. So I would go to a craft fair and sell some stuff. Etsy had just become, I think Etsy had been around since 2006 and I'd been on it since 2008, but it was 2009, 2010 when people were really conscious of wanting to spend their money with small artists, hoping to support them. There was the artisan movement that was going on too. And so that was really what drove me. And I think in many ways, and this has been kind of the story of my life, is that I do a lot of work and I put a lot of things out there, which means that I often end up being at the right place at the right time. There's only so much of those opportunities that I can control. But the point was really to keep doing the work and to do a lot of it and consistently put it out there. But yeah, right now is a very different time than 2008, having lived through both of those times. Hopefully I'll live through this one too. Quite honestly, in 2008, people weren't dying. The economy was in collapse, but it was a very different feeling. And also, we just had an election and there was a certain sense of that change was going to come in terms of our leadership. And so I don't have, really clear parallels then to what's happening now, because I think the world just feels a lot more precarious right now.
Definitely. I think one thing that I love that I've heard you talk about is the importance of honoring your mind and your body as you might honor one of your crafting tools. So being in this moment when there is so much uncertainty and hardship and just kind of, we're all everywhere. What are your thoughts on productivity and creativity and making when our minds and bodies might be deregulated?
Mm-hmm. Well, I used to keep a really strict schedule, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 or 6, and I would block out my time and spend, an hour in the morning on email and a certain amount of time. Like I would get 8 things done in a day and I would have scheduled time for that. That's all out the window now. I don't do that. I just know that I need to be working, starting at, I try to get to my desk, which is in my house, by 9 in the morning, and I try to wrap up by 6, but I have a more nebulous idea of what I need to get done. I am not working on as many client projects as I was in the past, and I'm not working on the weekends teaching anymore. So I'm just allowing myself, to sleep in. a little bit more, and to go to bed early, and to duck out if I need to a little bit early, but not really adhere to as strict of a schedule as I used to. So, yeah. And I also go for lots of walks, because that's the one thing that is still available to me. You know, so many other things are closed in my neighborhood. I can't go to my wine bar. I can't really hang out with my friends like I used to, but my dog and I will go for maybe an extra walk every day. So instead of doing 3, we do 4. And that just feels like a really good place to be offline and to clear my head and to get some exercise. And it's also where I do a lot of my best thinking. So yeah, like if I'm stuck, if I'm writing right now, writing a book, and if I'm stuck, I just can go for a walk and usually like work through the problem while I'm walking. Like writing actually doesn't really happen for me in front of a computer. It happens for me when I'm doing my dishes or when I'm on a walk, or taking a shower. Like that's when all the really good writing happens.
Yes, and I can definitely, I think getting up when you need to, going to bed when you need to, I feel like that is a practice that for me at least this time has really pushed me into, and I'm very grateful. Speaking of your writing, you were an early adopter of blogging in 2006, and we've talked to so many creators over the 3 seasons of Own Your Content about the importance of creating content and work that you can own and control using blogs and personal websites. How has this concept of owning your content played out over your career, and why is it important to you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think particularly if you're an artist, and if you're Black, I will say that, because my granduncle was a musician. He was a singer. He had some records out. And I think a lot of us have heard stories about people losing control of their content, and seeing other companies make a lot of money off of things that they got paid very little for. And so I've always been kind of guarded about what I'm willing to give away for free and what I charge for and how much I charge for for it. So, there are certain things that are really important to me. My processes are really important to me, and my sources are very important, and those aren't things that I readily share. I feel like that's my intellectual property, and people who ask me for really specific technical advice, or really specific product advice or resources, I will just come out and say, no, those are not questions I answer. And if they require more, I'll just tell them why. And I think it's really good modeling for artists overall to understand that you can push back and you don't have to share everything all the time. I think blogging pushed us a little bit into that, where we were open books about our lives, social media even more so. And so there's really a question about, how much does any one person want to share, and how much do you want to keep to yourself, and where do you draw the line? And so I'm really strict about the boundaries in terms of what I share and with whom and what I say, that there are just certain lines I don't cross.
Yeah, and you recently published a really beautiful blog post on Instagram activism and shared some powerful thoughts about some of the problematic ways that white folks were showing up for Black creators in response to the Black Lives Matter movement and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Can you share more about what this form of activism brought up for you and how it's unfolded over the past month? And
it was really interesting because I think in the very beginning, there was this movement to amplify Black voices, and it was this gut reaction, and it was done without any real thought about the long-term repercussions and what it meant for those of us who were getting the sudden attention. And so at a certain point, I was getting like 1,000 new followers a day. And because I'm a person who has really strict boundaries, and I have very slowly grown my social media following to what it is now, that I have the followers who've kind of grown with me and kind of understand where I am and what I share and why I don't do certain things and why I don't answer certain questions. And then suddenly I had all these new enthusiastic followers who were like pushing all my buttons. And so I needed to take a step back and really think through like what's going on. And even some of my existing followers started like kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying things that were problematic. And like I was, as many Black folks in this country are, I was dealing with just the repeated police brutality, like that weighs on you, and it's something you carry in your body because your parents went through it, your grandparents went through it. So it's all this compounded trauma. And it was just one more thing to have all these new folks want something from me and want a response and, you know, want to share what they were doing personally. And it was just, it's too much. It was just too much. And so I wrote that post to say, hey, this is, you know, like, this is how I'm feeling. This is why this is a problem. And I got really good response to that. Now, what that meant was that it got shared, like, I think last count before I went offline for the weekend was like 400 or 500 times. And so then I had a new influx of followers, and then I had people sending me nasty DMs, and I was like, I'm out. Hewett's out. Like, bye-bye, I'm gone for the weekend. But I know this wasn't just happening to me, because I got a text from my friend, and I think I even wrote about it in the blog post. My friend George McCallman, who's an art director and a fine artist, and he texted me, he said, Jennifer, what is even happening? And we talked back and forth about it, and he wrote a really beautiful essay in the San Francisco Chronicle about it, about his experience. And so, and his friends' experiences, like some of the things that we were hearing about. But we also, both of us had the sense that this was a moment of excitement and everybody was just rushing to do the thing. And then it would just completely die down, which it has, right? Which is a relief for those of us who are on the, for those of us who are on the receiving end of it, but also really worrying, because it's like, well, if we want it to sustain interest in anti-racism work, are we going to have to keep, you know, the dominant culture constantly engaged by giving them something new to do every 2 weeks, right? That's the frustrating thing about it. And so I get that people are really interested and wanted to do something about it, but like, the outrage isn't the activism, and sharing posts is not activism. I think there was a Saturday Night Live skit, a song, I wish I could remember it, where the song was like, I got so mad that I went on Twitter and I tweeted a thing, and now I've solved XYZ. So yes, yeah.
And I love that you bring up the sense of urgency, because we spoke a bit before on our call last week about the kind of some of the tropes of white supremacy that underlie perfectionism and some of the craft world. And I know urgency is one of those tropes. So kind of switching to another, I know that growing up, you went to this predominantly white Catholic school where they were really kind of strict in art classes, and they said, you need to draw this tree and it needs to be green and brown. And you were like, why can't it be pink? You know? So I'm curious about, you know, how has your identity as an artist been shaped by your experience as a young person in an environment that seemed to really stifle your creativity rather than support it?
So I went back and looked at some school photos from my elementary school and realized that actually it wasn't predominantly white, but the administration was. It was in a very affluent, very white part of town. It was the next neighborhood over from where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And it was a Catholic school, so it was about as diverse as Catholicism is in Southern California. So my brother and I were 50% of the Black population at my school of, I don't know, 250 kids, probably about 250 kids. And this is in Los Angeles, so that tells you a lot. And so it wasn't so much, I mean, art classes were really stifling at that school, but so was everything else. It was an incredibly racist and classist school in terms of the hierarchy. And I remember even being in 5th grade, and a couple of the girls in the class, we had this horrible 5th grade teacher who loved to play favorites, and it was this crazy manipulative way that she would play favorites. And a couple of the girls in the class like sat down and figured out, well, so Mrs. Gray, she always likes the white kids the most. And then after the white kids, she likes the Asian kids. And like, they actually, like, in 5th grade, we understood this, right? So this is what was going on. I can say her name because she's dead now. She was really old when I was there, but she's no longer around. But what I really took away from that school was and I think there's a lot of talk right now about homework, but I never did my homework, never, ever. And I got penalized back and forth for the homework for not doing my homework because it was busy work. I didn't want to do it. And the reality was that I was like the kid who got everything the first time around, and I understood. So I like just wouldn't do it. And when it came time for art class, we would get these really silly projects, like Santa Claus could only have black gloves and black boots, and you only had 2 shades of pink that you could choose for his face. And I was just like, not gonna do. I was not having it. So I just didn't do any of the work. And at the same time, I had teachers who didn't want to interact with my Black father, so they just would never alert him to the fact that I was not doing the work. So when my parents finally found out, they were like, why didn't anybody know? Why didn't anybody tell us? And it was specifically because, and I sensed it then, and I really understand it now, is they were scared of my dad. My super sweet, gentle father.
And how do you feel like some of those practices have shaped your identity as an artist? And I know you've spoken a little bit about kind of this fear of failing, and I'm curious about how you transcended that kind of, or broke through that very harsh
therapy, man. It was really, I got to a point professionally, right, where I just, like, in order to advance, I knew that I had to deal with some kind of block that I had. I had massive anxiety, and I'd had panic attacks since I was a teenager. And finally, I had the mother of all panic attacks, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And I looked around at my coworkers who were really talented and smart, and I didn't feel like they were any different or more talented or smarter than I am. And so I thought, well, there must be actually something like wrong with how I'm reacting to this. So I went online and I found a therapist, which is not a thing I recommend doing, except that I found the perfect therapist online. The only reason I went with her was because I didn't have to call around, because I have phone anxiety, and talk to people, and like, yeah. So her website told me everything I needed to know. And she specifically dealt with perfectionism. And it wasn't anything that I understood that I had at that point, but within 10 minutes, she said, you know, you're a perfectionist. It's classic. You're not, this is nothing unusual. And she gave me an assignment to go out and make a mistake. And just, I think in some ways, to desensitize me from the fear of making a mistake. So I went out and made a mistake, and I have no clue what it was. But when I reported back the next week and she asked me what had happened, I was like, nothing honestly happened. And that was really what opened the door for me. I started doing things like speaking up in meetings, which is not a thing I had done. Got to the point, and I was working for an e-learning company. I got to the point where I would actually like lead team trainings, do presentations, things that had terrified me before. And I'd also been an overachiever, and I mean, I kind of still am, but I would spend weeks working on a presentation, and it got to the point where I would do it the day before, knowing that it was going to be just fine. And when I got to that point where I was like, I can just put stuff out, I can just try and fail, it's going to be okay. I feel like career-wise, I really moved forward really quickly after I got through that.
And what was I know you've done some projects in the past, like 52 weeks of printmaking, where you really just have to like create. And you had mentioned earlier about just kind of like sharing work that you didn't think was necessarily good. How did these two things intertwine? And how did you did you need to learn to fail in order to start sharing work, or what inspired you to start sharing that work? And for those of us like me who really struggle both on the front of like, I'm afraid to, do 52 weeks of this thing because what if my work isn't good enough, but also like I'm afraid to share it because what if nobody likes it? So how did that all kind of bundle in there?
Yeah, I had to get over the perfectionism in order to start making those mistakes and putting out work that was not great. I also think when you start to deal with your perfectionism, when I started to, I also got to the point where I realized that, and this might sound harsh, but nobody really cared, right? Like nobody is really watching you so closely that you're not allowed to fail. In like such a big way, like nobody cares. And even now that I have a ton of followers and I'm putting work out, like nobody really cares if I put something out I don't like or that they don't like. It doesn't really matter to me in so many ways, but it takes a bit of work to go out to do that. But the muscle, and I think confidence is definitely a muscle, the muscle of putting work out there and having it fall flat or having it be accepted and loved. You know, to be honest, it's just the like the weights that you're lifting on a regular basis to get stronger and to get more confident. And it was low stakes. It was completely low stakes. I had another job at the time. I was doing consulting. This was just something I was doing once a week. And it was really to help me build a portfolio and get better at what I was doing. It wasn't for, to be honest, the likes. It wasn't for the accolades. It was really just to build that muscle.
And what a powerful thing to be able to do. And I think that's such helpful wisdom to say, like, when we make something low stakes, instead of thinking like this project is going to be my entry point to becoming a full-time artist, that's so paralyzing because like that's a huge thing. So I really appreciate that. I'm noticing the time and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. We're going to do a quick exercise to kind of, well, Jen, I know you love the phrase thinking with your hands, and you might have even coined it. So I feel like as a facilitator, it's really important for me to make sure that we always have an opportunity to, as Jen would say, think with our hands. So I'm going to ask y'all to join me for a quick exercise, and then we will return to Jen for a Q&A. Before I do that, Jen, I just want to like close this part by saying thank you so much for sharing some of that wisdom. I'm excited for more. Yeah, if we can get all the jazz hands in the world. We don't take it lightly, and we're really grateful to you for sharing your story with us. So I'm going to share my screen for this quick exercise. So Jen talked a lot about how to navigate perfectionism, and reading Jen's work and looking at her talks and listening to podcasts that she's on, I've gotten a lot of inspiration for a way to think about my own perfectionism. So I'm going to invite y'all to engage with me in a quick exercise so we can think about that. And I call it Embrace Your Craft Manifestos. So I'm going to invite y'all to get a blank piece of paper, and I can see some of you on my little grid view now. And as you have that piece of paper, I'm gonna ask you to think about a project that you're working on, or a relationship, or something, anything that you're doing that you're currently struggling with. This could be, like I said, a project, a relationship, a practice, or a hobby, really anything that you're feeling a little tension with. Also, I don't know if y'all can hear my dog, but he's all the way in the background, so sorry if you hear a little yelp. He's fine, trust me. So on your blank page, and again, this is something that I took from some of Jen's work, and I'll share it with you after. For 2.5 minutes, I am going to invite you to write down all of the sentiments that you feel are getting in the way of you really embracing your most authentic sense of self or craft as it relates to this thing. So essentially, what is the voice who stops you from doing something whispering in the back of your mind? And I'm gonna ask y'all to create some space in between each phrase, because we're going to be writing something underneath it. So these are just some sample ones that I threw out that at least come up for me sometimes, but I'm going to play some music and we're going to start. We'll do about 2 minutes to start. Okay, let's go. Got about 30 more seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap us up on that one. Remember, you can always do this exercise again after the call. I know for me, I could take 10 minutes and write down all of the things that what I call demon voice says to me when I'm trying to create something. So do not worry, you will be able to write more later. So Jen had a really beautiful Creative Mornings talk in San Francisco a bit ago, and I was really struck by the way she very poignantly addressed some of the values underlying perfectionism that were standing in the way of her craft. So when someone told her, follow the guidelines and rules, she says back to it, experiment and figure it out along the way, embrace uncertainty. And when someone said, be well behaved and never question authority, Jen writes, question everything. So now that we've outlined some of our own, again, I call them demon voices, you can call them whatever you want, I'm going to ask you to do what Jen did. And beneath each of these phrases, I invite y'all to turn on your most loving, bold, caring, and authentic voices and respond to those phrases that you've written down as Jen has modeled for us. I'm gonna give us 2.5 minutes to do this. Again, you can do this exercise anytime. This is just a very quick burst, so let's go into it. We've got about 30 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to pause that now. Thank you so much for doing this exercise with me. I really appreciate it. Again, this was like a very abridged version of what could be a much longer exercise, and I encourage y'all to continue the practice of doing this if it serves you. Another thing for my own manifesto that I recommend doing, I essentially took some of the kind of more positive or affirmative words and then put them on their own piece of paper and designed them in a way that I could like post this on my wall and look at whenever I felt out of alignment with my work. And I definitely encourage y'all to create those. And some of you might be like, well, this is my manifesto. Like I want to have both of those things because both of those things live in us and both of those voices are true. And it's a great reminder. So I encourage you to, if you'd like to share anything that you created, you can use our hashtag that Catherine will share in the chat and tag us or Jen. Or if you'd like to spend some more time making one of your own, you're welcome to do that. So now I'm going to bring Jen back up. It is time for Q&A. Super excited. This is my favorite part of this chat because I get to hear from everyone else. So Jen, just to give y'all a bit of context around how we're going to do this, we've gotten a couple of questions from the chat that Catherine has shared with me, and we're going to continue kind of getting some of those questions from the chat. So if you have any, feel free to share them. We'd also invite y'all, after I read some of those questions, to raise your blue hand and come on screen. We would love to see your faces and hear your voices. And I promise you don't have to be shy. I'm shy, and I'm right here too, talking to Jen. So if I can do it, you can do it, I promise. So Jen, hello, welcome back.
Hello.
Our first question is from Sophie, and that is, how did you find your craft, and how did you decide that printmaking was for you?
I found my craft just on a whim. I was still working that corporate job, and I had a corporate job in a very creative environment, and I was working with all these designers. And then just a quick step back, in my 20s, I had a stationery business where I worked with outsourced printers, and I ran that business into the ground because I was in my 20s, and that's what you do. And and so when I was in my 30s, I wanted to do something creative because I was finally getting over my anxiety and felt like I had the space, the mental space to try something new. And so I went to a drop-in screen printing class at the Mission Cultural Center here in San Francisco. It's called Mission Grafica, and it's on the top floor of the Cultural Center. And I was like automatically hooked. I just loved how operational and also how creative screen printing is, and really felt like I had found my thing. And so I would go all the darn time, like every single weekend I would go and spend my Saturday at the studio. And so when I lost my job, I suddenly had all this time to go to the studio, and that was like the thing I wanted to do, was ride my bike out to the studio and print, and then ride my bike home.
I was muted, sorry. Thank you. From Jen, we have, early on in your art business, what did you do yourself, and what did you pay someone else to do?
I did everything myself. So early on in my art business, I would do all my film by hand. I would cut all the fabric by hand. I burned my screens myself. I would sew everything. I didn't outsource anything except for sewing in 2013, and then I decided I wasn't going to do those products anymore. And I haven't really started outsourcing things. I didn't start that until 2019, so just last year was the first year.
And somebody, Nina, would love to hear more about your creative process. How do you go from knowing what you want to make to actually getting it there?
I mean, that's like an hour-long response. So I like to work with constraints now. Before, I would leave things open-ended and do whatever I want to do. But let's talk about my 2018 project, which was Tea Towel of the Month Club. And people would subscribe for a quarter or a year of tea towels. And I did it in 2017. I think I did, yeah, I started in 2017, and I would just like do whatever design I felt like doing, which was really tough actually, because when you have no constraints, the world is your oyster, and you have too many options. So 2018, I decided that I was going to work with just birth flowers. So whatever the flower was for birthdays that month, that was what I was going to draw. And so for the first one, I set up a look and feel and kind of a template for what I was going to do. And I knew it always had to have 3 colors. I knew it always had to have a frame. I knew that it would only be printed on 1 of 2 grounds, or meaning colors of fabric. And so everything I did had to fit within those constraints. And a lot of my design is actually based on what is possible within screen printing, and also what is economical. So there are a whole bunch of different things that I have to think about, which is the number of colors, the tightness of registration, the size. I knew that the max I could do would be 3 colors. So I had to figure out a design that would work really effectively for 3 colors across 12 months. So that's like in a nutshell how I did one project, but I have at any given point like 3 or 4 projects going on. Now I do a lot of digital prints. So I bought a fancy printer, and because I don't have access to my screen printing studio, like most things in San Francisco, it's closed right now. And so if I want to sell work on paper, I have to print it out from a digital printer. And so that actually has changed what I can print, because I'm not thinking about the number of colors, the complexity of printing it, because the machine does it for me. So really the technology and the process I have really dictate what I can do and what I should do.
Yes, and I recently read one of your Instagram posts where you really ask your audience or your followers, fans, to think about what it means that you're having to put your post in a square. And I could go on for days about that, but I have to get on to the next person. It's not my turn anymore. I'm like, okay, Alexa, I'm nerding out a little bit here. Sandra asks, what do you wish people would ask you about?
Oh gosh. I mean, the thing is that people ask me about everything. I have no idea. That's a fantastic question, Sandra. I think I'll have to think about that, and maybe I'll post it on Instagram or in my newsletter or something. The response. But let me think about that.
Do you have a thought on what you wish people would not ask you about?
I mean, I think about all the no's all the time.
Yep.
Oh, actually, here's a good question. I think that people don't think about the financial aspect of what I do at all. I think especially with the fabric design, that is highly, highly aspirational. And yet it's not financially very rewarding if that's the only thing you do. But that is the thing that gets glossed over. There are classes that teach people how to do surface design. There are agents who help people with their surface design careers. But what nobody says is that it's a really lousy way to make a living unless you're business savvy and have other lines of income. So I think that's, I think that's what I wish people would ask about more. And honestly, I wish that was something that artists talked about more, is that this is a really hard way to make a living if you're not intentional about how you're doing it.
And you, again, I'm nerding out, but you recently posted this beautiful pie chart on Instagram of your 2019 income. And I think it's such a helpful model for artists who really have, especially aspiring artists, have no idea what it takes to really shape a career. Because from the outside, it can look so like, oh, Jen is a printmaker, Jen is, but there's just so much there.
And I have to give credit, that pie chart idea originally came from Andrea Pippins, who's a fantastic illustrator, and she used to be a blogger. She used to live in Baltimore, but met a Swede, and so moved to Sweden and just had a couple of babies. She just designed a Kwanzaa stamp. Like the USPS is using her design for this year's Kwanzaa stamp. Anyway, people should give Andrea a follow. And also she has a fantastic newsletter and blog where she talks about these things.
Awesome. And I see me and someone else have already put that information in the chat, so y'all can follow up there. Let's see, our next question is, as a mime, I can't separate myself from my craft. How would you suggest freeing myself from judgment?
Oh, that's a really good question. I have no idea. And I want to say that I can't separate myself from my craft either, because I actually have a really physical craft. Printmaking is inherently really physical. I have thrown out my back by not paying attention to what I've been doing. I have no idea. I really don't. In some ways, what I do is I just lean into the physicality of it. And when I do that, my mind stops working, and it's really nice.
Yes. And I invite folks in the chat too to share some thoughts around this as well. There's so many. Yeah, that's beautiful. A question from Ever is how to push back to folks who want to pick brain in an effective way.
Oh, I just tell them no.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I have on my website, I have FAQs, and my website is horribly out of date. My designer is working on a beautiful new one. But what I tell people is I don't even have time for coffee or chats with my friends. And so if I have free time, that's what I want to spend my time doing. I also was, from 2010 to the end of 2016, I was an HR consultant. And the beautiful thing about being a consultant is that everybody understands that your time costs them money. And so having that experience of having been a consultant, and that was what I was doing to support myself while I tried to get my art career off the ground. So having that be the example and seeing that people wouldn't want my consulting time for the most part without offering to pay me, made it much easier for me to just, like, if somebody wants to pick my brain, I would say, okay, you know, that's great, but that's going to be X amount of dollars. The other thing that I have found that I have done is I've set really, if you want to pick my brain, like I'm only available at 8:30 on Friday morning and nobody else is available then. So then nobody wants that time. But what I found with people who wanted to meet up and pick my brain, which is definitely something I did early on in my career, they were the worst. I would never get a thank you. We would go and meet for coffee. They would not buy me coffee. So I was like, this is an easy decision to make. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah. I love that incredible example of boundary setting that I think many of us could really benefit from implementing in our lives. I will take that with me. Rachel says, I'm really intrigued by vulnerability and artistry, especially because we usually want to present our shiniest and most successful selves to the world. Is there room to be honest and say, I'm not always okay, but still be very professionally facing towards clients?
Yes, there is a way to do it. But you have to do it carefully. I don't, you know, the people who follow me on social media where I am vulnerable are not necessarily my art clients or my design clients. I mean, I think some of them are. But I don't know if I have a great answer or example of how to do that. I will say that people want you to show up as yourself because there is so much shiny polish out there to the point where it feels really fake. And so you have to get really clear on how much you're willing to share fairly early on. And not that that can't change, because certainly that has changed for me as my following has gotten bigger. You know, like I never answer questions about my personal life. Like that stuff is pretty much off. Nothing I share. Like I don't share about my family either. It's just, that's off limits. But you need to get clear with yourself how much you're comfortable saying. And then be prepared to adjust if you don't like the repercussions of that. That's, you know, there's no perfect for this. There's just try and fail and try again.
Definitely. And I love the way that you speak to your followers and kind of declare who you are and say, like, this is what I bring, this is what I offer. And, you know, yeah.
Not everybody likes it though. And I do get pushback, but what I always say is I have a point of view and I don't expect everybody to have the same point of view. So if you don't like it, you don't have to follow me. It's okay. But, you know, don't expect someone else to make the work or say the things that you wish they made or said. That's not their responsibility. It's yours.
Absolutely. And to me, you really highlight the way that owning your content isn't just about what you create, but how you shape your relationship with the receivers. And I think that's something, that I will cherish. Our last question is from Jessica, who says, I enjoyed your creative bug class and book. Are there tips for those that want to share our work as resources, so workshops and print?
So I think, Jessica, you're probably asking about teaching opportunities online and in person and books, etc. So I don't, again, right time, right place, did the work. I was teaching in person. I had a project called Print Pattern Sew in 2014 or 2015. That became the basis of that book, Print Pattern Sew. It became the basis of my class. And so there was a lot of visibility into me as an artist, me as a printmaker, me as a textile artist, because of all the work I was putting out. And so the opportunity to teach online came to me repeatedly. And because I was already teaching in person, people started asking me to teach in person more. And that book actually came about because I had written a proposal. So I decided that would be a great project, and I wrote a proposal. I don't want to get too into how to write a book proposal, but I will say that if that's something you want to do, there are a lot of resources online for you to find more information about how to write a craft book proposal. It's an involved process, and it will give you a good taste of how much work is involved in writing an actual craft book.
Thank you. And I know it's 6 o'clock, but we do actually have a last question that I'm getting from behind the scenes.
It's only 3 here.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I'm being so East Coast centric. Question from Femi, which is, do you have any tips on how I can embrace my culture in my work?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like, you know, okay, so here's a question I get asked a lot, or not a lot, but often enough that I need to bring it up, is people will ask me, what about my work is specifically Black? Now, mind you, it's never Black folks who ask me that. And what I come back and say is, I'm Black, and therefore the work that I make is Black. So there's no separating me as an artist from me as a person. I mean, I do draw certain boundaries, but that's the line. You know, there's no separation there. And embracing your culture within your work, I think, you know, honestly, you're just embracing who you are and you're sharing that. And if there are certain motifs that really resonate with you, then use those motifs. If there are colors, use those. But yeah, like specific tips, I just really think you be you. You do you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I think that is such a beautiful sentiment to end on. I know everyone here, we've got 380 people on the call right now. Everyone is so grateful for your wisdom. I know I am. I'm just gonna share a closing slide, and while I do that, I invite everyone in the chat to just, yeah, express gratitude for Jen alongside with me. It's been so special. If y'all wanna share any reflections, you can do #ownyourcontent and tag us at Creative Mornings or Jen. You can see our tags on the screen. We're gonna share a follow-up email 24 hours after this call. We'll share some links from Jen, some more information about Own Your Content and WordPress.com. And yeah, oh, we will also have a survey. So please feel free to fill that out so we can have more information about how to continue these awesome calls. So thank you so much. I'm going to play our music again as we fade out. And yeah, just if you want to save the chat, I know there was a lot of like richness in there. You can click the triple dots. I'll turn that off at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the chat box, and you can save it that way. Natalie, I promise we will also share the playlist in that follow-up email, so you do not have to worry. But mostly it's just chill beats on Spotify. But we'll share the exact one. Jen, thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Everybody waving by. I'm going to stop the screen so that I can see everybody waving by. That's like,
I want to see everybody. See if I can get the gallery view.
Yeah,
oh my gosh! Yay!
Yay! I know, it's so funny. I've only seen like 4 faces this whole time. Now I can see everybody. Yeah, so again, if you want to save the chat, we encourage you to do that. Jen, I know I've said this like 8 times, but wow, thank you so much. It's been such a joy. And yeah, we will see y'all next
Bye,
time.
everyone.
Bye. I'm closing the call, waving out, saying goodbye. Thank you for joining us. Bye, Jen. Thank you so much. Bye, Mom. My mom's on the call. Bye.